Okay, guys. So today we're going to continue working on the speaking section. Do you remember how many tasks we've said we had in the speaking? How many types of questions?
4.
Or perfect, yeah. And we've been covering the first two, right? We worked on Tuesday, and yesterday you must have been practicing with just money. So today we're going to move on to the third task, the third question. In this case, it's going to be an integrated one as well. But from now on, task 3 and task 4 are both going to be academic. So they may be a bit different in terms of content as task 2. Okay, although the structure is pretty similar. Okay. Hang on. Okay, this is the one. So as I was telling you, the structure, what you need to do is quite similar to what you guys needed to do for task 2. So you're actually gonna read something. You're gonna read a short passage, a short text. You're gonna have the same amount of time to read it, 45 seconds. After you read a text, you'll have to listen to an audio file the same way that you did in task 2. In this case, it's not gonna be a conversation anymore. It'll be a lecture, but it's still a listening file. You'll have 1 minute. It usually lasts 1 minute. And then you'll have to answer the question. You get 30 seconds to prepare and 60 to speak. So as you can see, everything's the same, right? You read something for 45 seconds, you listen to a lecture in this case, and then you answer the question, 30 to prepare, and 1 minute to speak. So any questions so far as for the structure? Okay, well, now let's talk about the topics. What sort of topics you'll find in this task? So I think that this is interesting, and it's really good that we know what the topics are because you can be better prepared. In fact, I don't know, like according to the ETS, this is kind of the topics, the most common topics that you get. Okay, so you have topics like psychology, biology, and business, and those three are the most common ones. As you can see in the chart, they are the ones that appear the most. So it's usually going to be biology, psychology, or business. Now, sometimes, I'm not going to lie, there have been some cases in which you have other sorts of topics. So you have things like sociology, art, history, literature, maybe, or geology, I don't know. But most of the time you get one of these three. So my advice, try to practice with these topics, try to maybe read, check out some vocabulary related to, and that should help, okay? Because it's very likely that you have one of those three. When we have psychology, I would honestly say is the easiest one, mainly because of the vocabulary, because everything's about, just how our memory works, our mind works, sorry. So how we interact with each other, how our memory works, how we process experiences, deal with them, how we learn. So all of those processes that have to do with the mind. Now, biology is always about living organisms, more specifically animals and plants. It's really rare to find human biology, but I think sometimes it happens. So living organisms, it's about how they are organized, their life processes, relationships, how they have evolved, maybe adaptations. That's something very common to have. So biology, all about animals and plants. And business is not like hardcore economy or something. It's just like advertisement most of the time, or marketing techniques and strategies to attract customers. So the basics of how a business operates. And then others, well, I couldn't tell you. You have many different options in there. But still, we know the structure, so it should be okay. So any questions so far here on the topics? Okay. Now, this is how it's going to be. We're going to start with an example, and that will show you the structure of each part. So what you're going to have to read is something like this. It has a title, and it's a short text, not that long, right? 45 seconds. So it's sort of the same length that you had in task 2. So we're going to read this. Could anyone maybe read the text?
Okay, I will do it.
Yes.
Behavior modification. Individuals often modify their behavior based on what they have learned about the possible consequences of their actions. When an individual learns through experience that a certain behavior results in pleasant consequences, that behavior is likely to be repeated. An unpleasant consequence, by contrast, discourages further repetition of the behavior. While this can be observed in experiments, it also occurs frequently in everyday settings, when individuals change their behavior based on what they have learned about the consequences of that behavior.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So that was the text. It is about behavior modification, right? What you have in the title. So as you can see, this is sort of a short passage, right? It's a passage, it's an explanation of what behavior modification is, of how it works, maybe some examples, sometimes you can have them here. But there's one thing that you need to worry about. There's just one thing that you care to find in this text, and that is going to be the definition of this topic. Okay, so I don't know if you guys noticed, but you have one definition, or you may have more than one, but I just want you to find one definition of this concept. So what is behavior modification? Can anyone tell me?
How human behavior changes due to several things that he or she does.
Okay, yes. So how a human behavior changes based on the actions, right? The things that we do, our actions. Okay. More specifically, maybe we could say based on the consequences of our actions, right? So maybe honestly, my advice, you can try to, you're gonna have to take notes. It's better if you do. So you can take notes on some parts that you found from the text. You could paraphrase it if you want. It's good for vocabulary, but either way, this is just gonna be a short part of your response. So it's okay if you just copy and paste some words. Not gonna be a problem. So if we had to maybe point out a sentence or a phrase from this text, maybe we can go with the last one that says, when individuals change their behavior based on what they've learned about the consequences of that behavior. So when we change our behavior based on experience, basically, right? That would be the definition. And as you can see, you have these like red flags. It says, well, this behavior modification can be observed in experiments. It also occurs frequently in everyday settings, right? So it occurs when individuals change their behavior. And that is the definition. I think you have it at the beginning as well. Maybe you have it in the middle. I couldn't tell you, but you will always have that definition. So that's how the structure is going to be. You have a title, which is a concept, it's an idea, it may be a process. So it's something that could be defined. So in this case, it's a concept within the field of, what topic would you say this is? Psychology, business, biology?
Psychology.
Psychology, for sure. So it's a concept within that field, within that area. So those are the elements. You have the title, which is the key concept, okay? It's the topic. So I really want you guys to write down what the title is in your notes, okay? That is the most important part. So you need to remember, and you need to mention this in your response. If you don't mention behavior modification exactly like that, or you try to paraphrase it or maybe skip that title, then it's not gonna be a complete response, okay? So you are gonna have to mention this, so you better maybe take some notes or try to remember behavior modification. And then the other important thing that matters is the definition. Now, all those additional details that you have, believe me, are not important. So you just give it one read and you're done with that, okay? You're not gonna need anything but the definition and the title, okay? The title and the definition. So is this okay so far? What you need to do, you read, you take notes on the title, and you find the definition. Any questions?
No, it's all clear by the time.
Okay, great. So then what you're gonna have to do is listen to a lecture, right? So you're gonna listen to this lecture. It's gonna be a college lecture. So you're gonna have a professor that's speaking, or you could also refer to them as the expert, maybe. And this professor is gonna be explaining a little bit more on the same topic. So the topic's gonna be the same. The professor will still talk about behavior modification or whatever you had in the reading. So in this lecture, you may have a short introduction at the beginning. Sometimes you don't. But the important part, the key part, is that you will have, I'm gonna underline it, you will have one or two examples, okay? So you will have real world applications of that concept, real world examples. So how you see that concept in the, in everyday life. So one or two examples. So if we're talking about behavior modification, then we're gonna see how that's applied in the real world, okay? So we're gonna see maybe some people changing their behavior, maybe the professor changing their behavior, maybe an experiment, I don't know, but you will see an example of that, one or two. And you may have some other additional details as well, but that would not be as important. So again, the most important part for the reading is the title and the definition. And in the listening, you just need to catch the examples. Okay, everything okay so far? Okay, so one more thing I want to say is, remember I'm saying, right, one or two examples. So actually, we also know that. The thing is, when you have psychology, you always have one example. And when you have biology or business, you could have actually one or two. Okay, but when you have psychology, it's always going to be one example. And in fact, this example could be something like the professor's personal experience. So it's very likely that the professor is going to explain this concept with a personal example. So maybe the professor is going to talk about one time when he modified his behavior based on an experience. Okay, so it's really common to have personal examples. Sometimes you have more general examples. So they talk about things like, I don't know, like maybe a specific group that does this. So maybe we can see how, I don't know, teenagers modify their behavior based on experience, or maybe how business people do it, or maybe how, I don't know, they do it in the military. Okay, so sometimes you have broader examples. And sometimes something that I've seen lately is experiments. So you have some sort of experiments. So they are like, okay, so we have put two groups of people in, I don't know, in a room, and we have seen how they act, and we have come to this conclusion. So those are the types of examples that you usually have when you have psychology topics. Okay, you have a personal experience, a broader example, or an experiment. One tip I can give you is try to look for the relationships among ideas. So try to understand if there are some cause and effect relationships before and after. If it's a story, maybe it's a story, you try to look for the sequence of events, make sure that you have the most relevant steps. So always try to make sure that your ideas are connected to. That's important. And if you have two examples, which is going to be biology or business, then you'll have two examples, some details. Okay, if it's biology, you're very likely going to have maybe some animals. So you're going to have, I don't know, an example of an animal that does that. Or if it's business, maybe a company, maybe just an explanation. So applications of the concept. Okay, real world applications of the concept. And that's pretty much it. So now that we've said that, how many examples should you be expecting here for psychology topic?
One.
Yes, exactly. So we're going to listen to that example. I'm going to play you the lecture. Take some notes. Please take notes. By the way, this is how you should be taking your notes. So you can try to have them organized. So at the top, you can, okay, it's loading. Okay, here at the top, you can write down what the topic is. So you're going to write down the title. Maybe we can even complete this. So the topic would be behavior modification. The definition, so you write some keywords, maybe change behavior based on consequences of actions. Okay, so that's it, topic and definition. And here you're gonna write down your notes for the examples. If you have one, you write down just one. If you have two, you write them the two down. So I'm gonna play you the lecture. Please take some notes and make sure that you catch those examples, or that example in this case.
Now listen to part of a lecture on the topic in a psychology class. This happens all the time with kids in schools. Say there's a little boy or girl who's just starting school. Well, they're not really used to the rules about proper behavior for a classroom. So at the beginning they might, I don't know, interrupt the teacher, walk around the classroom when they're supposed to be sitting down. You know, just misbehaving in general. Okay, but what happens? Well, the teacher gets angry with them when they act this way. They might get punished. They have to sit at their desks when everyone else is allowed to go outside and play. And they certainly don't like that. Soon, they'll learn that this kind of behavior gets them in trouble. They'll also learn that when they raise their hand to talk to the teacher and sit quietly and pay attention during class, they're rewarded. The teacher tells them she's proud of them and maybe puts little happy face stickers on their homework. Now that their behavior gets a good reaction from the teacher, the kids learn to always act this way in class and not behave the way they used to.
Okay. So that was the example right there. So can anyone summarize it for me? What was it about? What was the example about?
The example was about how kids used to behave badly during classes until the teacher punished them and allowed them to sit on a corner, and also the professor gives them some prizes after they behave well.
Okay, great. That's awesome. So yes, you're totally right. We have those, I mean, that sequence, right? That sequence of events, what happens first? So at the beginning, when the kid is new, he's very likely gonna just misbehave in school, right? Because he doesn't know the rules yet. So one kid misbehaves in school at first, and as a result of that, the teacher gets angry and punishes them, right? So the kid gets punished. That's the effect, the direct effect. And then after that, the kid starts behaving better, right? So the kid behaves the way that they're supposed to behave. So they may raise their hand, they may sit quietly, pay attention. So when they behave well, so we're gonna maybe highlight this part. What happens? The teacher gives them a reward, right? So the kid gets rewarded, the opposite of before. Instead of getting punished, they get rewarded. And as a result of this whole thing, the kid learns, right? So the kid ends up learning how to properly behave in class. So soon the kids learn to always act this way in class and not behave the way they used. So that's what happens, okay? That's like the summary of the example. Kids usually misbehave in the beginning. As a result, they get punished. Then they start behaving better. They get rewarded, so they learn how to act. So as you can see, that is really illustrating our concept, right? Because our concept says that people change their behavior based on the consequences of that certain behavior. So in this case, these kids in school are modifying their behavior in class based on their experience. So they have seen, okay, they have seen that when they misbehave, they get punished. And by contrast, when they behave well, they get rewarded. So they obviously prefer the pleasant consequence, and that's why they know how to behave. So that's, I would say, those are the key points, right? Those are like the most important relationships among ideas. You don't need to worry too much about the details. So it's not important that you mention things like, the teacher asks them to sit at their desks, or I don't know, puts happy face stickers, or raise their hand, talk to the teacher, sit quietly. So all those details may be useful as examples, but they are not that important. The most important part is always going to be the bigger idea. And most importantly, what I'm trying to say, I guess, is you need to, when you're explaining this later, you need to make sure that you're showing how this example is illustrating the concept. So if you can kind of put the concept and the example together and say, okay, so the kids are modifying their behavior based on the previous experience or the reaction of the teacher, then that's going to be a complete response, because you're kind of summarizing both and you're showing that you understand the connection between the two. Okay, so maybe that's what I could say as for the lecture. It's just an illustration of the concept. They don't exactly mention the concept at all, right? They just start right off with the example. We didn't have an introduction here, but it is an example of that concept. And you need to show that in your response. So do you guys have any questions as for the listening part of the lecture? Okay, guys. So now if we listen to the question and see what you have to do, this is what the question says. I'm going to play it and then I'll show you.
Using the example from the lecture, explain what behavior modification is and how it works.
Okay, so that was the question. Using the example or the examples from the lecture, explain what the concept is and how it works. So that's always going to be the example. Using the points and examples from the talk or from the lecture, explain the concept. So as you can see, they're not exactly telling you to summarize, are they? It's not like summarize the reading and then summarize the lecture or summarize the lecture. They are telling you to use the examples to explain the definition. So what you actually need to do is make sure that the listener understands after your response what behavior modification is with the example. Okay, so that's why I was telling you to make sure that you understand how the two are connected, right? And how the example is illustrating the concept, because that's what you're going to have to do in your response. So let's take a look at the template. So in case you have one example, this is what you guys will be doing. So first you need a short introduction. As always, you need an introduction as usual, in which you're gonna not summarize, but you're gonna explain the title, which is the topic, and its definition. Okay, here's where you're gonna use what you extracted from the reading. So you're going to explain what the topic is and how it's defined. So you could maybe use these words and say, according to the reading passage, the topic, which is behavior modification, is defined as, I don't know, when people change their behavior based on the consequences of that certain behavior. So it's a short introduction in which you are just explaining the definition of the concept. It shouldn't be more than, I'd say, 10 seconds. Okay, please don't spend too much time in the introduction, because remember, it's not the most important part. So let's say 10 seconds. Now then you're gonna use a short transition to transition to the lecture. So you could say, in the lecture, the professor illustrates this with the example of, if you want to make it shorter, with the example of, and then you explain, right? With the example of kids in school. So maybe you can use this reporting verbs and say, he explains that in the beginning, when a kid is new to a school, they may misbehave initially. However, as they get a bad reaction from the teacher, they start to learn how to properly behave, right? And then you explain the example. So that is supposed to be the longest part of your response. So you need to spend like 50 seconds there in order to complete the 60. Now, if you have extra time, you can go with a short conclusion, but I don't think this is necessary at all. You could just say, in summary, this is a glaring example of what behavior modification is. If you have extra time, you can do it. However, I suggest that instead of going with a conclusion, maybe you can just try to continue explaining the relationship, right? So you could say, maybe in summary, this is how kids modify their behavior based on their actions in school, or based on the consequences of their initial actions in school. So I'm just trying to show that connection. Okay, so what do you think? Do you have any questions about the template? Do you? Is it clear?
Yes, it is.
Right. Some more suggestions I can give you, maybe some more tips. You know how I said the most important part is always going to be the definition, right? But you have enough time, I would say. You have 45 seconds to only find that definition. So in case you already have it, if you already have the definition, you know what it is, you have the title, and you've taken notes already. If you have more time, you can also try to find some of these additional details so that you can use them later in your response. So for instance, here they say, right, they say this, they say, okay, where is it? Okay, so if a certain behavior results in pleasant consequences, that behavior is likely to be repeated. So you could use that in your response. You could say something like, as the passage mentions, when a behavior has a pleasant consequence, it's very likely to be repeated. And this is the same that happens with kids, right? And then you explain. So when they have a good reaction from the teacher, they receive maybe a happy face sticker, they like this experience, which is why they are likely to repeat the same actions in order to get the same reaction, right? So you can kind of combine the two, if you know what I mean. Now, this is only in case you really have extra time to explain more, to add more to your response. But you can totally have a great response, 30 out of 30 response without using those additional details, okay? Because it's not that important. You will always find the most important part and then the relevant part in the definition, okay? So yes, I think that would be it. I don't think there's anything else to this task. What tips can I give you? You need to make sure that you talk more about the examples, that you take notes from both. In your response, you should try to use some linking words and reporting verbs. More linking words, I'd say, because the reporting verbs, we have them in the template, right? We are already using them. But the linking words, you need to try to use them accordingly. So if we're talking about this sequence of events, for instance, you should try to use this linking word. So you could start, okay, so initially, when a kid is new to a school, they do this. And then subsequently or afterwards, or on the other hand, when they behave well, they get rewarded. Therefore, the kids learn how to behave in class, and finally, they start acting this way, right? So I'm trying to use those linking words. They help. I would say they are really helpful. You need to skip irrelevant details, as I said. Paraphrase, you're gonna paraphrase when you're explaining the lecture, because otherwise it would be impossible to repeat exactly what the professor says. So I think that's kind of we can, I don't know, give it for granted. Practice as much as you can. Maybe you can practice in a noisy room if you're taking it at a test center. And actually, one thing I didn't say, make sure that you read the question. That's something useful. Because sometimes it could be tricky what they're asking for. So maybe you have more than one concept here that's explained, but you just need to answer the question. So you need to make sure that your response is actually answering the question. Okay, so in this case, they're just asking about, okay, sorry, it's not that one. They're asking about behavior modification, right? But maybe sometimes you have more than one concept, but they just ask you for one of them. So make sure that you always read the question, not only in this task, but in all of the tasks, like in any speaking task or writing task. Okay, so make sure that you always read the question. So is it okay now? Do you have any questions, any comments before we start practicing? Okay, guys. So we're gonna do one then. You guys are gonna do one. So this is the reading part. It is about experiment effect, although I think it's the experimenter effect. So I'll give you guys 45 seconds to read. Remember that you're looking for the concept and the definition. Okay, 45 seconds.
Now listen to part of a lecture on this topic in a psychology class. For example, I recently read about a case in which a researcher was given two groups of monkeys, and he was asked to train these monkeys to pick up a ball and put it in a box. And he was told to record how many hours it took to train each monkey to learn to do this. Now, before he started the training, the researcher was told that one group of monkeys was highly intelligent and that the other group was less intelligent. In truth, there was no difference between them. All the monkeys were actually very similar in terms of intelligence, but the researcher didn't know that. He thought one group was smarter, so he expected that that group would be easier to train. So, what happened? Well, the researcher trained the monkeys to perform the action, and it turned out that, on average, it took him 2 hours less time to train the supposedly smart monkeys than the supposedly less intelligent monkeys. Why? Well, it turns out that with the supposedly smart monkeys, the researcher smiled at them a lot, gave them a lot of encouragement, talked to them a lot, worked hard to communicate with them. But with the monkeys he thought were less intelligent, he wasn't as enthusiastic. He didn't try quite as hard. wasn't quite as optimistic. Explain how the example from the professor's lecture illustrates the experimenter effect.
Okay, now you all will have 30 seconds to prepare your response. Okay. Would anyone like to try? Anyone? Maybe Luciana, why don't you go first?
Can you skip me, please?
Okay. So anyone else then? Maybe Shamir?
Okay, I'll begin.
You can go now.
According to the passage, the experiment effect is when a researcher is expecting results from an investigation, and he or she behaves in order to get those results from the experiment. In the lecture, the professor gives a clear example of a researcher who was working with monkeys. He was training them, and in a moment he thought that a group of monkey was smarter than another one. So he was investing more time in training this smarter group of monkeys and changing the conditions of the experiment. In summary, he's giving a clear example of the experiment effect.
Okay. Okay, great job. Well done. All right. It was a good response, pretty good response to your first try. And I think I have no comments. You mentioned the definition. You try to explain in your own words, and maybe that's what made you take up more time. So I don't know, try to always find the shortest way possible to explain the definition so that you can start as quickly as you can with the example. Okay. And yeah, don't forget to, maybe I would have tried to emphasize a bit more on the fact that these expectations that the researcher had affected the outcome, right? The outcome or the results of the experiment. I think that was important to mention. But it was well summarized. And I think that's the hardest part, to be honest, to be able to summarize that example in like 50, 40 seconds. I think that's the hardest part. So make sure that you practice to, not only with this type of content, but anything, try to summarize anything you can.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I have to practice more, be more quickly.
Okay, so yeah, that's the problem here. But it was great. Way to go. So why don't we do another one now? Let's try maybe another topic. Okay, let's do this one here. I think this is sort of sociobiology. It isn't exactly biology, but it helps. So here's the reading. You'll have 45 seconds to read.
Now listen to part of a lecture in a biology class.
Okay, so a good example of this, found right here in North America, is something an animal called the American pronghorn does. Pronghorns, as you may know, are a kind of deer-like animal. They live out on the open, grassy plains, somewhat in the middle of North America. And they are super fast. Pronghorns are, in fact, noted for being the fastest animal in the Western Hemisphere. Once a pronghorn starts running, zoom! None of its present-day predators, like the bobcat or coyote, can even hope to catch up with it. It's off in a flash. Okay, so why then do pronghorns run so fast? That's the question. Well, it turns out that quite a long time ago, I'm talking tens of thousands of years, things on the grassy plains used to be very different for the pronghorns. Because back then, lions used to live on the plains, chasing and preying upon the pronghorns. And lions, of course, are a very swift-moving mammal, much faster than the bobcat or coyote or other predators that you find on the plains today. But now, however, lions are all extinct in North America. They're no longer a predator of the pronghorn. Tens of thousands of years ago, though, the lions were there, chasing the pronghorns. So, back then, the pronghorn's speed was critical to its survival.
Okay, and the question is, using points and examples from the lecture, explain the concept of relic behavior. 30 seconds to prepare now. Okay. Who wants to go now?
I can go.
Okay, great. So you can go now.
So according to the passage, relic behavior occurs when an animal had an original purpose due to evolution, and now it is not used anymore in the environment. In the lecture, the professor illustrates this concept, providing an example of the American pronghorns that are currently super fast and no other animal can catch them. But this wasn't the case tens of thousands of years ago when lions used to live in North America. Lions are very fast and they can switch moves very quickly. So the speed of the American pronghorn was critical to its survival. And nowadays it's not used anymore.
Okay, great. I personally love that conclusion. So the speed was critical, but nowadays it's not used anymore. I like how you made that connection. I like how you summarize the example too. So great explanation. The definition was good as well. And timing too. So no comments, just try to add those transitions. And yeah, that's the only thing I can say.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm gonna do one more. I don't know if we have time. Maybe let's do a business one, right? I think. Not biology. Okay, let's do this one, which I think is film. So this is the reading. You'll have 45 seconds again to read.
Now listen to part of a lecture on this topic in a film class.
The other day I went to this great new movie, and one of the scenes in particular I thought was really set up nicely. At the start of the scene, before the action and talking and things started, you saw on the movie screen an image of a city. You could tell it was a big city. There were lots of buildings, tall ones, skyscrapers. And the cars and signs on the city streets looked old-fashioned, like they were from the past, like the 1940s. The other thing I noticed right away from this first image, just when the scene started, was that the city seemed gloomy. You couldn't see much because it was, well, there was mostly darkness rather than sunlight, and there was only just a little bit of light from the street lamps. On top of that, it was raining and kind of foggy. All of these details worked together to create a dark, gloomy, mysterious feeling. So then, when the action started and it showed detectives talking to each other in an office, I already knew that the office was located in a tall building in a big city sometime in the 1940s. And I had a good idea that the events that would be taking place would be pretty dark and mysterious because of the shot, the image I saw at the beginning of the scene.
Now this is the question. It says, using the professor's example, explain what an establishing shot is and how it is used. In 30 seconds to prepare. Okay. Does anyone want to try?
I'll go.
Okay, is that good? So you can go.
Okay. The passage states that establishing shot is an image shown briefly at the beginning of a scene, usually taken from away. It provides context for the rest of the scene. The professor provides an example of a movie which plays a scene from a big city with skyscrapers and all of that stuff, but it wasn't recent, so that provided a context that it was from old times. It also was rainy, it was dark, so therefore it provided a very dark and mysterious tone. And afterwards, when the action happens, he could already perceive the tone of the people who were acting in the scene.
Okay, great. You guys are nailing it. Nice. So, great intro. I like the way you started. You started differently. You explained the definition. You had transitions too. I noticed you used them. So afterwards, he could perceive, and you really connected the ideas. So, great summary of the example as well. Grammar's good. So great. No comments really.
Thanks.
Okay, guys. So I'm glad. Yes, your work. I mean, usually it takes some time to get used to kind of summarizing that type of content, but you guys are doing it right away. So really good. What do you think? Do you have any questions about this particular task, or maybe, I don't know, anything at all? Really? Okay.
Yeah, I have a question.
Sure.
I'm actually writing a little bit longer notes in this task. I don't know why, but it helps me a lot with the concept. Especially, I almost wrote the entire concept, almost with less words, of course, but I wrote the concept that I understood with my own words. And then, no, that was it. Only the notes for the reading part. And then for the listening, there are like 2 or 3 words each note.
Right. So yeah, I mean,
Is there a problem? I mean,
no, it's not a
do that?
problem. They're not gonna check your notes, not at all. So it's not gonna be a problem. They're just gonna ask you to, at the end of the whole test, to give them the piece of paper. You can actually, you're not allowed to take anything with you, but it won't be a problem. You know, do whatever works better for you. The strategies are different. If you feel that maybe taking more notes from the reading, fewer notes from the listening, or just paying attention to the example works, then go ahead. It's just a matter of choice.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Any other question?
No.
Then please don't forget the surveys. Today we need to fill out 2 because it's Thursday. So I'm sending you the first one, and then I'll send you the other one. Okay. Okay, that was quick. And I'll send the other one. And I'll see you next class. Have a great weekend, you all, and best of luck in your test, Rodrigo. I know you're taking it this weekend.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Good luck, friends.
Good luck.
I will tell you guys. Maybe I'm gonna be here just to listen the other classes. I think we have like 3 weeks of 3 more weeks.
Yeah, I think 3 more weeks. So yeah,
If-
that would be good. And you can
If I don't
tell
do well,
us.
maybe I don't know. If I don't do well, I will repeat it on 26. I don't think so, but
No, I think
just in case.
Yeah, I think you will do well. But yes, you can tell us your experience and all, and we can talk about it.
Yeah, maybe give you some newbie tips.
Yeah, that would be great. That would be awesome, actually.
And you, Andrea, how many times did you take the TOEFL?
I only took it once, actually, when I was finishing high school.
Oh,
yeah.
How was it? Easy?
Yeah, I mean, I think it wasn't that hard. I had to take the SAT as well when I was in high school. I think that was harder.
Were you in ASB or Calvert?
Yeah, I was in ASB.
Oh.
So yeah.
What school is ASB? American school?
It's in Cochabamba. Are you from Cochabamba?
Yeah, I'm from Cochabamba, but I live in Santa Cruz since I moved 15 years ago, so I don't remember any school.
Okay. So yeah, that makes sense. So yeah, it's an international school here in Cochabamba.
American International School of Bolivia.
Yeah, exactly, the American International School. So it's American and international at the same time.
Oh, right. Isn't there one in La Paz as well?
Yes, I think there's one in Santa Cruz, La Paz, and Cochabamba. Not sure about the other cities, but yeah, I think in Santa Cruz there was a British one. That was interesting.
Yeah, here we have the Cambridge. That's the British one. There's the Santa Cruz Cooperative School.
Yeah,
and there's the Santa Cruz International School. And then there's another that I'm missing. Yeah, I'm missing one, but yeah, those are the three, two American and one British.
Yeah, that's right.
Here we have 3, I think, right?
Where are you from, Luciana?
Here, Cochabamba.
Cochabamba. Okay. I don't know. I'm aware of Calvert and ASB. I think those are the 2 international ones. For
Carachipampa.
Is that American as well?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I didn't know.
Which
I know
one?
that language of instruction.
Carachipampa.
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 Oh, okay. Carachipampa.
I think in La Paz there is St. Andrews, obviously Calvert, La Paz.
Yeah, St. Andrews is one.
Yeah, and I don't remember which other one. In La Paz.
Yeah, I'm not aware of La Paz. I know St. Andrews and Calvert, but I don't know. Okay, guys. So yeah. So then, okay, I guess I'll see you next class. I gotta run to my other class, but see you guys. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.